Hello children. Today we are going to continue with the chapter of physics, in which the next unit that we are going to cover will be how to measure the volume, how to measure mass and measurement of time as well. So without much delay, let's continue. So the very first thing that we are going to study today will be the measurement of volume. Now you must have already seen these are the different apparatus that we use to measure the volume, which are having graduations present on it, markings present on it. This is a very common and very day-to-day graduated cylinder that we normally use in most of the things whenever we have to find out a particular measurement of any liquid, that it should be up to this much amount of liquid or whatever be the measurement. Similarly, syringe also, in which we have to be very delicate, we have to be very specific in taking the measurements. This is the burette. This you must have seen mostly in a chemistry lab, where we fill it up from the top end. We have to close this nozzle, and once it filled up to a certain level, then we use this basically for the titration process, the titration experiment that we do in class 12 in chemistry. Then we open up this and the liquid comes down by drop from this very burette. In the pipette, we will have to suck it from the top so that there is a marking present, so that the liquid comes up to that and fills up to that very liquid. Don't have to pour, because this is an open one. It's open from both these ends. All these are closed from one end, but this one is open. So we have to suck it up after dipping it into the liquid, and then again we can fill it up with a certain amount of liquid. That is what is known as a volumetric flask. So these were the things that how to measure a volume of any liquid. What about the solid? For the solid, when it is going to be a regular object, we have different formula. Like for the cube, we have side whole cube. For the cuboid, we have length into breadth into height, and so goes on. For the cylinder, we have pi r square h, the volume formula. So these are the different things in which we can calculate the volume of any regular solid. But what if we are having an irregular solid? In that case, how to measure the volume? To measure the volume of an irregular object, what are we going to do is that we'll be using a graduated cylinder, the one that we see, and we are going to fill it up with a certain amount of liquid present in it, maybe water, we'll say. And then whatever be the irregular object, what are we going to do is that we are going to simply drop it in. And obviously we know that as soon as we are going to drop any solid into it, so there will be a considerate rise in the level of the liquid. And this is what had happened. The moment we dropped a solid, so we saw that initially it was around 150 ml. Now it has increased from 150 ml to 150 ml. So it was at 150, so 150, 155, 56, 57, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, because there are 10 markings and the gap is of 50 units. So each marking is going to be of 5 units. So we see that this very measurement comes out to be how much? 180 ml. Alright, so that means what are we going to do is that as we already know that 1 ml is equals to 1 cubic centimeter. So we'll subtract the initial one from the final one, and we'll get to know the size of this very solid. That will tell us that what is the volume of this very irregular object. So this was the case how to find out the volume of any irregular object. Now the next thing is measurement of time. For the measurement of time, you can see is that this is a sand clock, isn't it, in which we are having a sand, and the moment it gets filled up, we have to invert it so that it again start falling down from the top end to the base end, and we'll get to know the time. So this was the thing that was used in the ancient days to keep a track of the time. But these days now we have much more advanced technique to measure the exact time. Now what are the different units to measure the time? We can measure the time in seconds, we can measure the time in minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, year, seasons also, fortnight, like 14 days makes one fortnight, so 14 days means 2 weeks. So either we can say 2 weeks or either we can say fortnight. 2 fortnight will make 1 month. So these are the different things for measuring, different units present for measuring the time. We also know a very basic relation that exists between the minutes and the hours, is that 1 hour equal to 60 minutes, 1 minute equal to 60 seconds, 24 hours equal to 1 day, 7 days equal to 1 week, and so on. So these are the different things, different units that we use to measure the time. To measure the time, we basically need a watch. it could be analog, it could be digital. Digital can be more precise and it can be very accurate, it can be used for accurate measurement. Now this is a watch, you can see, but over here we are having 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 and 55 and so on, isn't it? So basically this is a start stop watch which we can use it to keep a track of a particular movement happening, in which we have this start button, we have a reset one, we have this hand to be at the second hand, and this one tells us about a 1/10 of a second. The outer one is supposed to be inside a case, and this is a stop one. You must have seen this thing in a physics lab where we use this thing basically for, especially for the simple pendulum, where we have to track a record of like how many seconds were taken by for 10 oscillations happening, 5 oscillations happening and so on. So this is what we use. Since you people are in class 9, so everyone must be very well aware with a simple clock watch, a wall clock, in which we have this one to be as a hour hand, this is to be as a second hand, and this one is a minute hand, where this makes, as soon as this second hand makes one complete revolution or rotation of 60 seconds, it makes it to be 1 minute. So that means the minute hand will move by 1 minute. Or then similarly, when this going to complete from one complete rotation of 60 minutes, so that means that will be 1 hour. This is what we are very well aware. So this is what is simply an analog watch, or how to read an analog watch. Okay, so we have seen how to measure time, we have seen how to measure volume. Now the next thing is that how to measure mass. All right, right now what we are having is a physical balance, in which we are having all these equipments or the different parts present for a physical balance. You must have seen this thing in a physics laboratory. So today we are going to discuss about this thing, how to measure a mass of any object using a physical balance. This is normally used for masses which are of very low measurement or quite low in their masses, which we generally use or handle it using a forceps. I'm talking about those type of masses. For the heavier weights, so we have beam balance, we have spring balance and all these. But over here, for those small weights, we are going to use a physical balance. So let's see. As you already know that what is mass? Mass is the quantity of any matter contained in a particular body. That is what is mass. So based upon the principle of movement, now over here we know that there is a weight present over here, there is a weight present over here. One of the weight will be a known quantity and the other one will be an unknown quantity. Now this into the perpendicular distance from the point where it is being suspended, that is principle of moment of force, is what is the principle that is based upon for the physical balance. Now let's see how do we use it. The very first, over here you can see these leveling screws. So the very first thing that we are going to do is that we are going to adjust these leveling screws in such a way that the plumb line, all right, the plumb line points vertically downward. After this, what are we going to do is that we are going to raise the central rod. All right, we are going to raise the central rod in such a way by turning the lever. Now where is the lever? This is the lever. We have to turn this way so that it can be raised in the vertical manner, and such a way that this pointer comes out to be at 0 mark. It has to be at the 0 position. After that, as soon as it comes, or maybe it would oscillate for a second and then after that it may come up, but it has to come up ultimately at the point 0. If the pointer swings in one direction more than the other, then that means that you will have to adjust the balancing screws so that it swings equally on the either side of the 0 mark. Then after that, once it is done, lower it down the central rod, place the article to be weighed in the left side of the pan, and over here the standard weight. Now those will be, you will be provided from a weight box, and you will have to use it using a forceps, or you will be handling it using a forceps, and then you will be keeping it over here. Then you can just simply record the mass. You will get to know when the moment there isn't any oscillation happening, both are equally suspended, it comes aligned, then you can assure that this is of the very same quantity or the value whatever we are having it over here. Alright, because this was unknown and this is the standard weight that we kept. So in this way we can use a physical balance to measure any particular unknown quantity. Now the next topic that we are going to study will be a simple pendulum. As we know that what is a simple pendulum? A simple pendulum is a heavy particle, that is basically we call it to be as a bob, is suspended by a weightless inextensible string. That means the moment it is going to drop, it's not going to swing downward and upward, there won't be any swinging present, alright, and it will be free to oscillate without friction, and this is what it constitutes to be a simple pendulum. For a simple pendulum, the point from where it is being suspended, it has to be a rigid support, it will always be a rigid support, and this point of suspension will be fixed. Next is the effective length. What is the effective length? The effective length will be the total distance from the point where it is being suspended to the center of the bob, not till this point at the top where the bob is being attached, it will be to the center of the bob. Now how to get the center of the bob? We know that this measurement can be measured using a scale and all, we can measure the length of the string, but what about this? This we can calculate using the radius. Whatever be the radius, we'll get to know the middle part value. And how can we get the radius? For that we already studied micrometer, screw gauge and the vernier caliper to measure the radius of these objects for any circular object and all. So this plus this radius will give us the effective length. Alright, now let's see how does it work. Initially when we are going to drop it, so after certain time, after certain oscillations, after certain movement, it will be at rest. So the position at which the bob is at rest is known as the mean position or the central position. Now after this, what are we going to do is that we are going to hold it and take it to one of the extreme end and release it. The moment we release it, what will happen? It will come back to its starting position. It will not stop over here. You can have, or you can try it out at homes also, and it will go to the extreme end and again it will not stop, and again it will come back and it will go on. So what are these happening? These are continuous movements that are happening through the same path, and ultimately after, as and when the energy will be getting utilized, it will be coming down to rest and ultimately it will again stop. So in that case we can collect that how many oscillations happen during this period of time. So this is what it is. So first of all, let's see what is an oscillation. So oscillation is a complete to and fro movement. What is this happening? This is happening a to and fro motion, we can say. So that means you took it from here to one of the extreme end, release it. Now it goes to the other extreme end through the mean position and comes back. So this is what is known as one oscillation. Next is the time period. The time taken by the pendulum to complete one oscillation is known as a time period. Frequency, how many number of oscillations are happening? Alright, but in 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds? No, in 1 second. That will be the frequency of oscillation. So that is why we use a stopwatch to collect that in a that we are going to relate later on as per the time period. For one oscillation, how much time was taken, that will be time period. In that case, we'll be using a stopwatch. But what is the frequency of oscillations? In 1 second, how many number of oscillations are happening? Next is amplitude, the maximum displacement. Now many of the students get confused that this will be the displacement. No, displacement is the shortest path. Alright, so the shortest path will be taken up, or the maximum displacement of a pendulum from its mean position is called the amplitude. Clear? Because this is the extreme position that it is going. So the maximum, how far it is going, how far it is, so that will be the amplitude from the mean position. And next is the effective length. We have already talked about the effective length. So this is what it is about a simple pendulum. So when we have to calculate the time period, we have a simple formula. We don't have any derivation. We have simply a formula, that is T is equals to 2 pi under root L upon G, where pi 22/7, L means the effective length and G means the acceleration due to gravity. Alright, okay. So basically there are two factors on which a simple pendulum movement is going to depend, or the time period is going to depend. So time period, as per the formula also, we can simply say that it is going to definitely depend upon the effective length and acceleration due to gravity, not the mass. The acceleration due to gravity is what it is going to depend upon. So if there would be any changes in these two factors, so the time period is going to increase or decrease, that depends accordingly. Alright. Okay, children, let's continue. Now the next thing that we are going to study is a graph, how to plot the variables on a graph sheet. This we have already studied in a coordinate geometry of mathematics, so you can go through over there, or still I have taken up to brief you again. So for a graph sheet we need to have two values, that means an x part and a y part, that makes to be as a coordinate x comma y. X axis will be over here, y axis will be over here. Now as per the physics, if suppose we are having two quantities being given, one of them maybe is velocity, the other one of them is time. Alright, so out of these two quantity, one quantity has to be taken up on x axis and the other one has to be taken up on the y axis. Now out of velocity and time we do not know which one is supposed to be taken up on x axis and y axis. Always remember, on x axis we do take the quantity which is independent, that means the time doesn't wait for anyone, it will go on, whether you are increasing your velocity, whether you are not increasing your velocity, whether the velocity is constant, whether velocity is zero, it doesn't matter. If you are sitting on a vehicle, so that means if you are not able to reach your office, if you are not able to reach your school, or even if you are stuck in a traffic jam, so time is not going to hold up, time is going to continue. So that is why time will be an independent quantity and velocity will depend upon the time. So time is taken up on x axis and velocity is taken on y axis. Now after this, what I have used is a 2 centimeter graph. For the 2 centimeter graph, this complete entire block is of 2 centimeter and I have taken a 10 second, 20 second, 30 second and so on. So that means for every 2 centimeter I am using a gap of 10, 10, 10, 10 second. So that means the scale factor comes out to be that 2 centimeter on x axis is equals to 10 second. Same ways over here, y axis, we are having a 10 centimeter gap and we are using it as for 20 meter per second, then 20 meter per second, 20 meter per second and so on. Alright, clear? So this is what we are. So sometimes the ratio could be 1:1, whatever the gap you are taking over here, the same is the gap over here, like 1:1, 1:2, 1:3. Try not to take as like 1:3, 1:7, in that case you may face a problem. So try to take in a 1:4, 1:2, 1:5, that will be pretty good when we are going to plot the points on the graph sheet. So after plotting the graph, what are we going to do is that we are going to calculate the slope, and let's see how does it going to be useful for us. For plotting after plotting the points, what are we going to see, that we are having a straight line coming up. Straight line means that the object is, with the increase in time, the speed is also getting increased. So this is what it means from a straight line. Now let's try to calculate the slope. To calculate the slope, we need to take two coordinates. So I have taken this as one of the coordinate and this as one of the coordinate. We can take any two coordinates provided that are to be on the graph line. So what are we going to do is that difference in y upon difference in x, that is y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1, and we have already seen that x2, y2, x1, y1 in coordinate geometry. So 100 minus 40 upon 50 minus 20. So that is what comes out to be 60. The y part is denoting meter per second and the x part is denoting second. So meter per second upon second is going to be meter per square second. So what is that unit for? This is the unit for acceleration. So that is why the slope of this velocity time graph will be y upon x, that is rate of change in velocity, that means acceleration. Clear? But suppose if we draw a line over here, or I'll say that in first 40 seconds find out the displacement. So that means at 40 seconds draw a line towards the graph, and the area covered by this very shape will be the displacement. That means the area of this right angle triangle is going to give us the thing. Okay, the last thing that we are going to study today will be two types of graph taken randomly. Suppose after plotting we are getting maybe a particular point is not coming on the graph, so we'll try to take up the best possible or the nearest possible lines that sums up these coordinates. So we are not getting a straight line, but this is a graph in such what that with the movement of time, or as the time is increasing, the length is also increasing. Alright, okay. The second could be a scene in which we are having a graph of volume and pressure. Initially when the pressure was low, volume was high, and as and when the pressure gets increased, so what is happening, the volume is coming down. It doesn't mean that it is going to start from a high value of the pressure. We always count from the x axis. All right, so x is increasing, so what is happening to the value of y is decreasing. So over here we can say that it is an inversely proportional graph. So this is what we have to read out from the graphs accordingly, that what type of quantity are we having a comparison, and in what aspect the physical laws are to be applicable or are to be implemented over there. All right. Okay children, that's it for the day. So with this we come to the end of this first chapter, and very soon I'll be coming up with a video of the second chapter to start with. All right. Okay children, stay home, stay safe and keep studying, utilize your time. All right. Okay children, bye.